Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, it's the post-game podcast from a fantastic Timberwolves win over the LA Clippers on the road on Monday night. We'll break the whole thing down on the show here today. What the Wolves did that was so impressive defensively against what had previously been a red-hot Clippers team. Said the same thing when they beat them a month ago. The Wolves are now 2-0 against the LA Clippers, a lot of people's favorite in the Western Conference. We'll break down especially the defense, but also the Wolves' offense was ultra efficient in this one too. It's all coming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Happy Tuesday, everybody. It's a Victory Tuesday. It's also a game day. The Wolves are in Portland tonight to take on the Trailblazers. But a big win against the Clippers Monday night. This is the post-game podcast. We're going to break the whole thing down. The Wolves were dominant on both ends of the floor for, I don't know, I guess a little over half of the game in this one. It was they were actually trailing by 4 at halftime, but won this thing going away. Just completely crushed the Clippers in the third quarter. We'll talk about what was so impressive on both ends of the floor for Minnesota. Talk about Monte Morris's Timberwolves debut as well. It's all going to be on the show here today. First of all, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find the show. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. All right, so we talked about this on Monday's show. The LA Clippers are coming into this game. They were 27-6 since December 1st. They'd only lost twice since the Timberwolves beat them just over a month ago. They'd only lost 2 games since then. Okay. They have the best offense in the league since December 1st. So the best record overall in the league since December 1st. The best offense in the league since December 1st. And it's not particularly close. It's nearly 2 points better in terms of offensive rating, according to Cleaning the Glass, than the second best offense, the Boston Celtics, and over 3 points better than the third best offense since December 1st in the OKC Thunder. So no matter how you slice it, and this is a healthy Clippers team, by the way, everybody played in this game. And Minnesota held them to 100 total points in this game. And a bunch of that was garbage time. Like when garbage time hit, they had 91, 92 points. They got a dunk with 45 seconds left. They got them to 100. Yet another game, the Wolves held an opponent below 41%, just a shade over 40% for the game. And again, garbage time, and 100 points. But again, garbage time. And that's why I like to use Cleaning the Glass, because for stats for, offensive, defensive rating, some of that stuff, because it does take out garbage time, unlike Basketball Reference, which is great for so many other things. But just another dominant defensive performance for the Wolves. I want to talk a little bit of game flow, because this game was a bit up and down. Never really in jeopardy if you're on the Wolves side, but it wasn't like a start to finish dominant performance. It was just a well-played game for the first half. And then the Wolves, like I said, crushed the Clippers in the fourth quarter and really pulled away. So the first quarter was just kind of entertaining. Minnesota was up 28-24 after the first quarter. Didn't really have much to complain about. LA had a strong close to that quarter as well. I thought Minnesota came out and played well on both ends. They got some good looks offensively. They, picked up a couple cheap fouls early on defense, but otherwise we're playing well. It was a 4-point game. Second quarter, the Wolves had a lead, I believe a double-digit lead even. I think it got up to 10. And then LA closed the quarter on, I think it was a 20-6 run, and, had an and one. Cat fouled the 3-point shooter Paul George, I think it was, and you had the Harden 3 in the corner right before the buzzer. It was a rough close of the quarter. It meant the LA was up by 4 at halftime and obviously had that momentum. Remember early this season, the Timberwolves were a really good third quarter team that started to slow down here, like probably around the holidays. And they went back to their winning ways in the third quarter of this game. A 40-19 margin in the third. And it was an onslaught, like both ends of the floor. Minnesota, we're going to talk once I get to my key takeaways. We're going to dig into this a bit more. Well, actually, let's do this now because it fits well with the third quarter and the fourth quarter. Like, I mean, it was what I think 17-point game going to the fourth. The Wolves, it ballooned up to like 22, 23 and kind of I don't think it ever got closer than 16 or 17 really. And so the game was basically over before the fourth quarter. So let's just dig in on some of those key takeaways, starting with like this was a game wide thing, but it was very apparent in the third quarter. And that was just how impressive the Timberwolves defense was. And it started with the length on the perimeter. Jaden McDaniels was really, really good in this game. He only had 11 points. I actually thought he was really good offensively. He only played 25 minutes and he had 0 rebounds, but defensively, he was everywhere. It was there were a couple plays where Kawhi overpowered him, and that's going to happen over the course of a game. Kawhi Leonard is really good, really long, really powerful, really skilled. And other than that, Jaden McDaniels more than held his own. He had a nice pickpocket at half court that led to a dunk. He had a couple of tough 2-point makes. One was to kind of stem the tide after a Clippers run, so I thought he was good offensively too. But specifically on the defensive end of the floor, Jaden was awesome. I thought Conley was good. I thought Ant was solid. I thought Kyle Anderson was very good in the first half when he, like early second quarter, when he had the Kawhi assignment, when the Wolves had mostly a bench lineup on the floor. Kyle Anderson was very, very good. And then the second line of defense, Rudy Gobert locked down the paint. Like it was, obviously the Clippers are a different animal than the Bucks were, the Wolves last Thursday. But it was similar in that Giannis would get past a guy, and then it was like, oh, okay, here's Rudy. And, Doc Rivers had the quote after the game about how there's 3 7-footers on the floor. The Wolves did do a little bit of that against Milwaukee. But that's what this was, right? Like it's Jaden McDaniels at the point of attack, who's for all intents and purposes a 7-footer with crazy length and athleticism and true speed and quickness. And you get past him, and now you're dealing with Rudy and whoever else is back there. I mean, Cat had a nice block in this game. Rudy had 4 in this game and altered countless others. The Clippers broadcast that was on NBA TV, the simulcast, did a good job of, I think it was Jim Jackson, the color commentator, did a good job of breaking down a play where Paul George should have had a layup, but because of Rudy's presence, he just kind of threw up like a 12-foot floater that he missed. And sometimes those are going to go in, right? And then people could be like, oh, look at the drop coverage. Yeah, but guess what? A 12-foot floater for a guy that would rather get to the rim or just shoot a catch-and-shoot jumper, that's not as effective as a shot if you're the offense. And that's directly impacted by making him work to get past the first line of defense and then having Rudy lurking in the paint. Ultimately, the Timberwolves won points in the paint by 22 in this game, 64-42. A decisive points in the paint win for Minnesota. A really, really, really big deal. And Rudy, again, like this was a Rudy controlled the paint, and the 4 blocks is a big number, but it was, I feel like I said the same thing after the Bucks game, but beyond that, and then on top of that, the defensive rebounding was really impressive, which, the Wolves have come around in terms of defensive rebounding overall this season. And at this point, we have to admit that they're like, they're what, even at cleaning the glass, they're top 10 in defensive rebound rate. They're like number 2 on Basketball Reference, but at cleaning the glass, they're top 10. They did a good job in this game on the glass. When the Clippers missed a bunch of long jumpers, especially early in the game, Minnesota was there to clean it up. And they were only a +4 on the glass, but Cleveland. The Clippers had 10 offensive rebounds, but they didn't exactly have it wasn't like a cavalcade of second chance point opportunities or second chance opportunities or even ultimately second chance points for the Clippers. Minnesota was very, very good on the defensive glass in a tough situation. They tried a little bit of zone too. That was effective. And then all of that together, in addition to the paint defense, the Wolves also forced the Clippers into just 32% on 3-point attempts. We'll talk more about that in a second, and a couple of individual players for LA that did not play well. And we have to credit the Timberwolves on the perimeter again. And then I'll get to a couple additional key takeaways as well. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 3 million members. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch your winnings roll in. It's demon time on Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money. With as little as 4 correct picks, you can turn $10 into $1,000. Demons and Goblins are the newest and most exciting way to play at Prize Picks. Squares marked with red demons or green goblins get you different payouts. You can now win up to 100x, 100 times your money, with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks also offers injury insurance, so your entries can stay in play even if one of your players gets hurt. For basketball games, you have a player that exits in the first half and doesn't return in the second. That player projection won't count against you, and the rest of your entry stays live. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform that has an injury insurance policy. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now you can also find it on Amazon Fire TV. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find the Locked On Sports Today channel now on Amazon Fire TV. All right, so the Clippers came into this game as the #1 offense since December 1st. We talked about how the Wolves shut down the paint. Credit to the perimeter defenders, credit to the second line of defense, and ultimately to Rudy Gobert for genuinely altering how the Clippers were able to play this game. Related, before I get to my next point, kind of a sub point here, Ivica Zubac's only ended up playing 23 minutes in this game. He did have 11 rebounds, which was a game high, but he only played 23 minutes. He only had 6 points. He's had some good games against the Wolves in the past. Daniel Tice didn't see the floor until late in the second half, and the Clippers tried to go small. The Wolves size forced the Clippers to try and zag while the Wolves were zigging, right? Which is, of course, the whole thing. The Wolves need to be able to, if they're going to build a team, this is a whole other topic, but obviously relevant to this game. The Wolves were going to build a team that was going to zag while everyone's zigging, right? And have this gigantic team. They were going to always have to be willing to stay big when other teams tried to go small. And that was one of the concerns, or the points that detractors of the trade would bring up is like, hey, what about, everybody thinks of like the Warriors from a few years ago that started and well, not just started, but they were like the poster child for the small ball, I guess, renaissance, right? And what are you going to do if teams do that? What are you going to do if teams like Dallas and the Clippers did that to Utah a couple of years ago when Rudy and Mike Conley were there? But the Wolves are so skilled with their size and have the right other pieces, right? We've talked about this before. They have the perimeter defenders the Jazz could have only dreamt of having a couple of years ago, that it doesn't matter. And there was a good example of this. It was while the Wolves were pulling away early fourth quarter. The Clippers were very small. Rudy got an easy offensive rebound over, I don't even remember who, somebody that barely went past his chest, right? Just like a diminutive Clippers lineup. And Rudy got the putback. I think maybe that was the play. He also got an and one. Just taking candy from a baby is what that was. The Clippers tried it. It didn't work. And this is one of those things like, sure, maybe over the course of a 7-game series, you see different small ball lineup combinations that could hurt the Wolves. But remember, if the Wolves have to go small, got a couple of centers in Reid and Karl-Anthony Towns that are fairly mobile and can play small as well, and also stretch the floor. The Wolves have options too. It's a very versatile lineup on both ends of the floor. But the credit to the Wolves interior defense, after that front line of defense for getting that plus 22 points in the paint. They had 7 blocks in this game, 4 of them to Rudy. Clippers only had 3 blocks. The other point I wanted to make about the defense, the Clippers came into this game with the #1 3-point percentage as a team league-wide. They were shooting nearly 40% as a team from outside the arc this year, 39.7%. And since December 1st, yes, they've had the number one offense. They're also, let's see. Oh, hang on. I lost that. So for the season, the Clippers are fourth in effective field goal percentage. Okay. So they're, for the season, they're third in offensive rating. They're fourth in effective field goal percentage since December 1st. They're number one in offensive rating, and they're number one by a full percentage point in effective field goal percentage. The Timberwolves held them to 32.1% three-point shooting in this game. James Harden was 3 of 8. Nobody else was anywhere near a reasonable. I mean, Amir Coffey made his only one, and it was in garbage time. But like Paul George was 2 of 8. Russell Westbrook was 1 of 5. The Wolves were letting him just keep shooting it. Norman Powell, who hit, I think, 6 threes against the Wolves last time they played the Clippers, was 1 of 2 on three-point attempts. Across the board, the Timberwolves did a very good job limiting three-point attempts, period, which they've done all season. And I said this early in the year, like, go back to like Thanksgiving time frame, and there was this kind of clamor, national media, like, opponent three-point percentage is so fluky, like, the Wolves have been lucky, etc. There's a little bit of luck involved, sure. But there's also a skill to limiting or to forcing opponents, funneling them to taking the shots you want them to take, and deterring them from taking the shots you don't want them to take. The Wolves allow the most mid-range attempts of any team in the league. They also do a very good job at forcing above the break three-point attempts and do not allow very many corner three-point attempts. I don't care who's shooting them. Like, obviously, you'd rather have Russell Westbrook clanking away from three than Paul George or Kawhi Leonard. But you could deal with any of those guys shooting from the mid-range. Like, you just as soon, I mean, I don't know. I think I'd rather have Westbrook shooting a 3 than Kawhi shooting a 2. Certainly. Not maybe. I certainly would. But like, you get what I'm saying. Like, the name of the game is to force the opponent to take shots that you want them to take. They're going to get shots up. The Wolves actually do a pretty good job at forcing opponent turnovers, but that's not the nexus of their defense right now. Like, it's not banking on their defensive success, is not banking on, forcing turnovers. It's banking on, let's make them shoot bad shots, contest them as best we can, and get the rebound and go back the other way at our own pace. And the Wolves do an outstanding job of that. They did a fantastic job in this game. Again, 32.1% from 3 for the Clippers and only 40.5% from the floor. That's going to continue driving that defensive effective field goal percentage down if you're Minnesota. Since December 1st, the Wolves, yes, for the year, they've got the best defensive effective field goal percentage. That's still the case since December 1st. Remember that gauntlet of games from like December 11th to January 12th or whatever it was, where they played 16 games, 12 on the road, a back-to-back mixed in. Every single game was against an over 500 team. That's in there. And the Wolves, in that stretch since December 1st, are number one in effective field goal percentage defensively, number one in defensive efficiency, number 2 in defensive rebounding, number 7 in forcing turnovers. It does not matter who the Timberwolves play, unless it's one of those random off nights like we've seen them have, that the Charlotte game, the Atlanta game in game 3 of the season. But the Wolves are up for the challenge against good teams. We've seen how they played Boston a couple of times. Like, you go on down the list. They've now beaten the Clippers twice. The Clippers pretty unequivocally have the best offense in the league. And certainly you could argue the most offensive upside in the league. Minnesota also forced the Clippers to commit 13 turnovers. So Minnesota, another takeaway from this is that the Timberwolves only committed 11 of their own turnovers, which is shocking. They continue, I shouldn't say continue to trend. Over the last few games, they're starting to trend in the right direction in terms of limiting their own turnovers, which of course has been a massive issue all season long. My last thing I want to talk about takeaway-wise before we do studs and duds, let's talk about Monte Morris's debut and some of the lineups he played in, what he looked like in a Timberwolves uniform, or I should say how he played in a Timberwolves uniform, not literally his appearance, but he looked good, though. He did look good. I want to get into all that here next. We'll do individual studs and duds. That's how we'll close the show here today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at BetterHelp. The show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Sometimes we need the opportunity to get something off our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased on your life. So today I want to say how I really feel about something. You might even be thinking about the same thing this week, and it may seem trivial, but leading into the All-Star game, let's talk about how Rudy Gobert somehow did not make the All-Star team. I mean, I get it from a sheer numbers standpoint. And yeah, if the league actually advanced or not advanced, actually added roster spots and went to 15 as they should with the expanded rosters overall, and also just more teams since they went to 12 players on the All-Star roster back in the 80s or whatever it was, Rudy would absolutely be on the All-Star team. And he should be now. He's very likely going to win. He is the odds-on favorite to win Defensive Player of the Year. And it's not like he contributes nothing offensively. Like, he's got good offensive numbers overall. He continues to be, for what it's worth, does a great job. Field goal percentage-wise, he changes the game on both ends of the floor with his presence. And yet somehow he's not on the All-Star team. It's pretty frustrating. And again, it seems trivial, and it is in the grand scheme of all the things that we've all got going on in our lives. But it still matters. And, if it's something that's really bothering you, then it matters to talk to somebody about it. It's okay to be authentically upset, sad, or excited about topics that, again, may seem trivial. Therapy can look different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team or favorite player, not getting the respect they deserve on the national stage. It's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, Monte Morris made his Timberwolves debut in this one, and he played 18 minutes off the bench, saw his first run at the start of the second quarter, and then played again in the third, early fourth quarter, and was on the floor for the first part of garbage time. Finch went with from the 5 to 2 minute mark. He gave his second unit 3 minutes of run in there before he put in the deep reserves, Minot and Dacian Nix at the end of the game. Wendell Moore, by the way, was listed as did not play due to left knee soreness in this game. But Monte Morris was very good. He knocked down his first shot in Timberwolves uniform. It was a three-pointer off a screen from Rudy. Monte kind of floated to the left wing, and Rudy set a nice down screen for him so he could just kind of get a clean look at the rim a couple feet outside the arc, and he drained it. He missed one other three catch and shoot in the second half. He did hit a tough step back 2-point, mid-range shot in garbage time as well. He was a plus 10 in 18 minutes, 5 points, 2 assists, 1 steal, 1 block, a couple rebounds, 0 turnovers. That's the sort of line that the Wolves are looking for. Play 18 minutes. You go for 5, 2, and 2 with a steal and a block and no turnovers, knock down a 3. I think, pretty likely he ends up seeing those minutes expand. I think he'll probably end up playing more like 20, 22 a game instead of 18 a game, grand scheme of things. But this was a great performance, a great debut for Monte Morris. I thought it was interesting that Finch, when he came on the floor at the start of the second, when Morris did, he was the point guard. He was running the show. He ended up playing more minutes next to Mike Conley than I think I anticipated. But of course, that's how this whole thing's going to have to work, right? If you acquire a guy at the deadline, you feel he's one of your best 8 or 9 players, you're going to have to find a way to play him, right? I was worried about this from the Wolves side, Nas Reid. One of the reasons I was concerned about the contract Nas might get in the offseason was, hey, last year Towns missed, 50 some games, and Nas only averaged, 18 or 19 minutes a game or whatever it was last season. And I was like, okay, if that's what he averaged last year with no Towns, how's he going to get, more minutes when he's a more expensive player and a much bigger contract this year? Well, the answer is a true 3 big man rotation, and also literally playing 3 they haven't done this a ton, but they did it against Milwaukee last week. I don't think they ever did it against the Clippers in this game, but the 3 center lineup, that's another way to steal some minutes to not steal some minutes, but to allow those guys to each, add to their minutes totals. So when it comes to Morris, we are going to see him play with Conley a bit more. And in my conversation with Brandon Scott from Locked On Wizards on Monday, he talked about, even though he literally has only played point guard really for his career, and that's his pure, he is a true point guard. He doesn't have a ton of size. He can play off the ball. He's a good enough catch and shoot guy. And so is Mike Conley. And we saw Conley and McLaughlin play some minutes together earlier this year. We've seen Ike Alexander-Walker, run more offense than I think he'd ever done early in his career. And not looking for his own shot, but passing and looking for shots for others. So I was encouraged to see that. And certainly I think it's something we should get used to here moving forward. So good debut for Monte Morris, to be sure. All right, studs and duds. Lots of guys played well in this game. I'm going to start with Anthony Edwards. Yeah, he was 1 of 11 on threes. That's not great. That's literally the only thing he didn't do well in this game. He shot twos he was 7 for 7 on 2-point attempts in this game. 6 for 6 at the free throw line, 8 assists and only 1 turnover for Anthony Edwards. Plus he added 7 rebounds. This was genuinely, it has to be a top 10 game this season for Anthony Edwards. 23, 8, and 7 with 1 turnover. Didn't miss a 2-point shot. Didn't miss a free throw. An ultra efficient, outside of 3-point shooting, game for Anthony Edwards. 1 of 11 for 3, by the way. His only make and his last miss were both bank shots from the left wing, just like he did against Milwaukee. And I enjoyed the Clippers announcers trying to figure out if it was on purpose. Jim Jackson realized correctly that it was. The play-by-play guy seemed dubious, but obviously he's been having fun in these blowouts, trying to bake in these angle threes. But anyway, great Ant game. The decision-making was on point. I thought the passing was very good. The picking his spots, probing, making the right reads, things that he's done in flashes, especially late last season, early this season, kind of went away here recently. Not entirely, but is less frequent. I'm hoping. I know Finch said some stuff after last weekend that the Wolves had this big film session. I think it was last Saturday, a week ago Saturday, after their bad loss before that, where they got stuff on the table about the fourth quarter offense, etc. I'm hoping that in this 3 days off, the Wolves hadn't played since Thursday. They were off Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that they really plugged in with Ant and were like, hey, man, you're pretty unstoppable, and our team is very literally unstoppable if you're a dynamic playmaker on top of what we know you can do with the ball in your hands in terms of your own shot, your own scoring ability. If you can learn to make that right read, like really like break down the film and show him all these opportunities that he may be missing. And he didn't miss very many in this game in terms of passing to the open guy or passing to an assist, the hockey assist or whatever. Very strong, well-rounded offensive game for Anthony Edwards. I thought he picked his spots beautifully offensively himself. Was really, really good. I'm going to give Rudy Gobert a stud, 17 and 10, 6 of 10 shooting. We talked about him already. He was a perfect 5 of 5 at the line. He had 4 blocks. He absolutely controlled this game in terms of the paint. Fantastic Rudy Gobert game. I don't know that there's much more to say about his performance. I talked about Jaden played well. I'm not going to give him a stud, but he played really well in this game. I'm going to give the third stud to Naz Reid. Off the bench, Naz had 11 and 7. 5 and 9 shooting, 1 of 2 on 3-point attempts, knocked out a big 3 from the corner on a really nice possession for Minnesota that was capped off with a Naz 3. Tied for second on the team in plus minus in this game at a plus 17. A very good Naz Reid game off the bench, and he's the third stud in this one. I also want to shout out Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He easily could have gotten one. 15 on 6 of 9 shooting. Perfect 3 of 3 outside the arc. 5 assists, 2 steals, only 2 turnovers in 24 minutes. And if this is the version of Nickeil you're going to get, you're not going to lose. Like, he was really, really good. Conley was good. We talked about McDaniels. Kyle Anderson was solid, especially in the first half. We talked about his defense. Across the board, a strong game for Minnesota. I don't have any duds. No notes when it comes to duds. Like, everybody played well. I was very impressed with the all-around performance for Minnesota against, I'll say it again, it bears repeating. The best team in the league over the last 2.5 months since December 1st. The best offense by far. The best effective field goal percentage shooting team since then. The best 3-point shooting all season long. Best 3-point shooting team, I should say. They're 40% on the season. They shot 32% from 3 in this game. Just over 40% from the floor in this game. This was a statement win for Minnesota. They're now 2-0 against the Clippers, so they can't lose the tiebreaker head-to-head, which is huge. In a West that's jumbled, 4 teams within a game at the top of the conference. Now, next up, the Timberwolves turn around and play tonight against Portland. Didn't have time today to preview that. We haven't seen Portland in a little while. The Wolves did win that matchup, Friday, January 12th. So I guess almost just over a month ago. They won that one 116-93. A dominant Gobert performance. He had 24 and 17. That was at Target Center. This is on the road on the second night of a back-to-back. You obviously want to be careful here. It's a game the Wolves should win, Portland's lost 4 in a row. They lost the Pelicans 93-84 last time out. I mean, scoring 84 points in an NBA game in 2023 it's something. So anyway, the Wolves are in Portland, and like they got to win both of these. Like I know it would be easy to usually when you play 2 games against the same team, it's like you can split them, whatever. I mean, they lost to Charlotte recently. They lost to San Antonio not that long ago. Close call against Detroit, close-ish. Like, come on, guys. Like, you can't lose these. Win these games. Go into the All-Star break with a legit 4-game winning streak. Come out and take on Milwaukee on national TV a week from Friday. Like, this is fun, right? I mean, the Timberwolves are now what's the record? 37-16 in sole possession still in the Western Conference. They only briefly lost that to OKC. I know OKC is struggling a little bit. Minnesota's a 1-game lead on them for the lead in the West. 1.5 games plus the tiebreaker on the Clippers. 1.5 games plus the tiebreaker after playing just 1 game so far against the Nuggets. This is a big win for Minnesota. All right, that's all we have for you today. Of course, we'll have a show Wednesday. It'll be the post-game pod following Wolves Blazers on Tuesday night. The live postcast again, live on Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube, and then also the audio here at Locked On Wolves. Jack and Luke will do that after Wolves Blazers on Tuesday night, and I'll be back on Wednesday. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.